Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be joined by this man. Matt Rawlings is joining us. He is a man of many talents. He is a pianist, a recording artist, a producer, an arranger. I'm very honored that he has joined us here on the Paul Leslie Hour. We're going to be talking about a lot of things, including something that is very newsworthy. Matt Rawlings is the producer of the latest Willie Nelson studio record, That's Life, featuring Willie Nelson's interpretations of some much loved Sinatra tunes. So, Matt, thank you very much. It's an honor to speak to you.
Thanks very much, Paul. And just at the top, since you've introduced it that way, I just want to make sure everybody knows that I'm a co-producer of that record. But the great Buddy Cannon and I,
Right.
this is our third Willie collaboration, and our second Willie Sinatra collaboration, actually. Yeah.
Something that's interesting about the albums that you've done with Willie Nelson, all of them have kind of a theme of the American songbook. You did the Gershwin album, which was great,
Yeah.
the first Sinatra record, and now this one, That's Life. Tell me how did Willie Nelson get the idea that he would like to include you as a co-producer on these?
Uh, to be honest, the idea came from Buddy. Buddy Cannon is an old friend of mine, 30-year colleague and friend. And the first one, how it all started was with Summertime, which was, Willie singing Gershwin hits. George and Ira Gershwin, and again, great, of course, Great American Songbook, but specifically Gershwin. And that came about because the year that we did that, which I believe was 2016, it all runs together now. But, Willie was awarded the Gershwin Prize, which is the Gershwin Prize for Popular Song, which is a congressional honor given in Washington, D.C. every year, although I'm not sure if they did it this last year. But anyway, traditionally every year, and it's given to a songwriter. And so, Carole King has gotten it, and I think James Taylor and Paul Simon, and, the heaviest of the heavy songwriters. And everybody, when they think of, or most people, when they think of Willie, they think of On the Road Again, and they think of, his singing, his performing, his persona. But I mean, Willie wrote Crazy for Patsy Cline, and Willie wrote Funny How Time Slips Away. I mean, he's written classic standard songs. So anyway, he was, the first call, I was actually on a bus on tour with Lyle, Lovett, playing piano on a bus on a day drive. And I got a call from Buddy saying, "Hey, Matt, so they're they're giving Willie," and Buddy has produced he produces every other Willie record other than these sort of American Songbook jazz ones that we do together. He's Willie's main producer, and he's done a bunch of them. And he said, "Hey, they're giving Willie the Gershwin Prize this year in about 8 or 9 months." And Rothbaum and I, meaning Mark Rothbaum, who's Willie's longtime manager, also used to manage Miles Davis, and legendary guy. But Mark and I had this idea to do a record of Gershwin songs. To commemorate and kind of coincide with him receiving this award. And Buddy is a brilliant producer, but that style, those songs, there's only so much you can do with that sort of body of work, and it's not really his wheelhouse. And so he thought of me and said, "Do you want to co-produce this record with me?" And it was, of course, an immediate yes. And I became the arranger. I had a concept, and I had a concept of a group of guys to play on it, and we just went forth and did that first one, connecting it with the Gershwin Prize. It went on. I mean, when we got nominated for a Grammy, I was kind of flabbergasted. But then when we actually won the Grammy for Best Traditional Pop, it was kind of mind blowing. And so then Willie, really drove the next one. Frank and he were very good friends, and Frank, is his favorite singer, and so he knows, he's very familiar with the canon and with Frank's records, and so he had the idea to, hey, we won a Grammy. This is working. Let's do another one. Let's do a Sinatra record. So we then launched into making My Way, which was the first of the two Sinatra records. And again, I arranged, and this time we added real strings and real horns. The first one we didn't do any of that. We kept it very very small. And the second one we kind of expanded a little more and made My Way, and again it won the traditional pop Grammy, and so we just decided to make a second one. There's so much material, and I think on this new one, on That's Life, we got to go a little deeper into the catalog, and with My Way, I think we kind of cut the hits, not I don't want to say obvious, but somewhat, obvious choices, which was the right thing to do. This one, we cut Cottage for Sale and The Wee Small Hours of the Morning. We were able to, sort of riding on the success of the last one to go a little deeper, which was really exciting for me because those are some of my favorite songs.
Well, I have to say, Matt, it's a great sounding album. I really love it. I love all of these albums. I uh, I interviewed Joe Nick Pataski one time, who wrote the one of the books about Willie Nelson with his
Okay.
collaboration.
Yeah, he's done a handful of them.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of books. Period. But
Yeah.
he said, in my mind, and I want to get your thoughts on this. He said, in my mind, Willie is more of a jazz singer than a country singer.
I've heard that quote. Um, uh, yeah, I totally know where that's coming from. I mean, he is an interpreter of song, and he's an improviser, both as a guitar player and as a singer. So in that sense, absolutely, he lives in that world. I think culturally and historically, and sort of emotionally and spiritually, he's a country boy. That's where he comes from. So it's really kind of an astonishing mashup to me of those two things. Um, and really, what comes out to me with Willie is that, and I've worked with a handful of other artists that are like this, but I remember the first, and I don't remember what the song was, but on the Summertime record, the first of these three, whatever the first song was that he sang, the very first line he sang, and it's Jay Belleros and David Pilch, and it's me, and it's like this sort of, it's a jazz setting, it really is. The very first line out of his mouth, and it was like, oh shit, it's a Willie Nelson record, like immediately. I just, I chalk that up to the fact that Willie can be no one but Willie. Like there's never a hint of him trying to like fit the room, like the room fits Willie. Like Willie, when Willie walks in the room, it becomes Willie's room. And so, when he sings the song, whatever the song is, and he's sung all of them pretty much at some point or another, you'd be hard pressed to find a song, especially a standard popular song, old song, country song that Willie hasn't sung or recorded. And, and all of them, it's Willie, and it's authentic. It's authentic because his voice is so authentic. So yeah, he's a jazz singer, he's a country singer, he's a folk singer, he's an Americana singer. He's just an icon, you know.
Willie has been in music for such a long time, and so many people have crossed paths with him, either the people who worked with him or his fans. When I interviewed him, one of my fondest memories was seeing him outside, and he was signing for all like tons of people. But Matt, from your perspective, working with Willie Nelson, what is it like? You're in the studio with him. There he is, a few feet away. You've gotten acclimated to him. What is it like to work with the man?
Oh, it's just hmm, you know, I mean, it's there's always a particular feeling when somebody of that stature is in the room with you. So there's that aspect of just like I'm in the room with a legend right now. There he is. There's Willie, and but other than that, he's one of the most relaxed people I've ever met. I mean, the persona you see in interviews, I mean, that's him. Like he doesn't, like I said before about his singing, he doesn't shift. He doesn't have a press Willie and a, recording Willie and a, Willie's Willie, and it's always that same Willie. So you know, he wants to learn the song and then he's going to sing it, a handful of times. He's going to play trigger and he's going to let us, record all of it and make him sound great, and he already sounds great. But he doesn't micromanage a bit of it, which is lovely. I mean, he's very involved in song choice and of course in approving the arrangements and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes just to actually making the music, it's just like water or something. He sits down and out it comes. When he does it, that's just what he does. There's no pomp about it or pretense. It's just Willie sitting down singing and playing. You know.
You were mentioning the co-producer of these albums, Buddy Cannon.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who has produced so many records, but also has written some great songs.
Amazing songwriter. Yeah.
Yeah. And is a soft spoken kind of guy.
Yeah. Have
What
you had him
about
on your show?
I
Have you had Buddy?
did?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see many interviews with Buddy, but he was nice enough to give me one,
Yeah. Yeah.
which people it really blew up. So there are a lot of people who know about the
Oh,
incredible talent of Buddy, but what has it been like for you to work with this legendary producer?
I mean, I learned so much from Buddy, and so much of it is about waiting. I mean, Buddy is a guy who, um, he's a bit of a country Zen master, I think. Just uh, uh, he's a man of few words, but when he has a comment, it's 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 usually always right, and not. It's never about him. It's never about, you know, dig how great a producer I am. It's always about, like, he's 100% focused on what is going to make this record speak correctly, and more importantly, what is going to make this record, uh, uh, you know, be the absolute correct vehicle for this artist. Like, what is there something that's in the way? Is there something? He runs almost purely on instinct, and not. I mean, he has a lot of skill and a lot of, he's extremely musical, and like you said, he's an incredible songwriter. He's written tons of hit songs, but really he runs on intuition. So if something is not quite working for him, he'll if it keeps not working for him, he's going to say something and try to get to the bottom of why. And that's just, it's like he's a great match for Willie, because they're both, you know, it's like, it's kind of no bullshit, no big deal. Like, let's just get it done. It served him well, for sure. And artists love working with him because he's he doesn't blow smoke up their asses. He's honest, but he's a kind-hearted, gentle guy. So he's lovely to be around. He's a great friend. And you ever have those kind of friends who are just, uh, they're solid as a rock, and they say like three things. It's like they're three words that come out of their mouth, but it's exactly what needs to be said. He's that kind of guy. I'm the opposite. I'll talk for days. So we're a good match. And as far as these records, we kind of pair off. My wheelhouse on these records is writing the arrangements, because I have, that's just a part of my background. I have that vocabulary. And then as far as the tracking sessions, again, I play, but then I kind of run the tracking dates as far as the hands-on, if there are comments, specific stuff for the players that pertain, to what's going on the floor. And then Buddy's in the control room again with that sort of global perspective, saying, I don't think this is working. Can we, or it's really too fast, and then later down the road, when we're doing more stuff with Willie, and Buddy's kind of the Willie whisperer, I think. Like he knows how to. They have a long. They've written a bunch of songs together. They've made a bunch of records together. So that the trust factor between Willie and Buddy is really strong, and it works out really well.
I always like interesting little connections that happen in music. Something that I thought was interesting is that the great Al Schmidt worked on this, which
Yeah,
is kind of a, I don't know, poetic thing, because the very last Sinatra record Al Schmidt worked on.
yeah. And I'll tell you, I love Al, and he's one of my favorite people, and again, like a dear friend, and I mean, a national treasure, in my opinion, a living legend, and that we got to record in Capitol. But uh, there's a real sadness to the to why Al mixed this record, which is that the great Ed Cherney,
Hmm.
who recorded and mixed both of the first two, and who is again legendary. Like he's of that ilk with Elliott Shiner and Al and a very quickly diminishing ranks of these legendary engineers that bridge the worlds of the 40s and 50s and 60s and today, and so they bring with them all of that experience, and we lost Ed. The Our tracking dates at Capital B for this record were his last full tracking session, and then later that year he died of cancer. So um, Al was sort of the only choice really to mix this record, and he and Ed were very dear friends. And then our great friend Nico Bolas actually assisted in the mixing as well, and he's another legendary and also and is best friends with Al and works out of Capitol a lot and or did. Um, so so yes, a beautiful full circle moment, and I got to play Nat King Cole's old Steinway on the sessions, and we cut in Capital B with the pictures of Frank hanging on the wall, and then Al gets to mix it. So I think it's a beautiful tribute to Ed that we were able to close the record out that way, and it also just hurts my heart to know that he wasn't able to finish it himself.
Hmm. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I was talking on email to the great songwriter Dean Kay, who wrote the song "That's Life," and
Mhm.
he was saying how he appreciated that Willie recorded this. And it occurred to me, you know, so many of these songs they're really old. They're decades and decades old.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, all of the great recording artists, Willie Nelson, Paul McCartney, a few years back, Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
uh,
Tony Bennett.
Tony Bennett, everybody eventually gets around to the standards.
Hmm. Yeah.
What quality do you see in these songs that cause this endurance?
Melody and harmony. I mean, melody is simply, I mean, well, and lyrics. I mean, lyrically, they tend to be kind of period pieces. They're not lyrically they're old, and their colloquialisms and references are old. Um, the melody writing is that was the great age of melody writing. Today, so much of pop music is image driven, artist driven, producer driven, beat driven, and not, like real sort of depthful melody. It's like it's not appropriate in most of pop music today. Country music, melody is again was and a different version of it was a driver, but it's not really anymore. Country music has moved way closer to pop music in that sense. So these songs represent kind of to me the golden age of melody writing, and melody to me a great, and I'm an old school guy, but that's what drives a lyric. A great melody. It's like in musical theater. You don't have a lot of dialogue. You have songs telling the story, and so you have lyrics to songs that are telling the story, and the only thing they have to ride on is melody. And so melody has to create tension and create release. It has to have shape. It has to have short phrases and long phrases. It has to have breath. It has to have all these things that have the ability to actually transmit something effectively. Um, and that's what these songs have, coupled with amazing harmony, and so it's master songwriting, the Gershwins. I mean, but all of the songwriters. So, that's the if I had to pick a single thing, it's melody.
It's probably not entirely fair for me to ask, but could you pick a track from the That's Life album that you think is just a knockout?
Cottage for Sale
Yeah.
I mean, I love all of it. I think it's all amazing. I love Willie's read on it. That song is particularly Um, it's just one of my favorite songs that Frank ever recorded. And not to toot my own horn, but I love the arrangement I wrote, the string arrangement for it. I feel like I kind of nailed it. And I'm really happy with it. And then the way Al and Nico mixed it, the strings, like it just sounds right and old and like, oh my God. The first time I heard the mix of it, it brought tears to my eyes. And the way Willie sings it's, I mean, that the song, it's such an amazing and sad and heartbreaking song. And then Willie singing it so plaintively and just perfectly. I mean, his read is so spot on. So that's my
Yeah.
personal favorite. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It demands your attention. It's really it's heavy.
It's
That's
heavy. Yeah. Yeah.
despite all of the things that you do, you're very versatile, not only in what you do, but in the things I mean, you're a guy, you've worked with Blues Traveler, but also Willie Nelson, and we could keep going. But would you say at your heart, you're a jazz guy?
No, no. I
No?
mean, that's I don't I can't really place myself in sort of one genre as like I'm that guy. Jazz is where I started when I was a
Mhm.
kid. When I first started playing piano, I just lucked into a teacher that was sort of the lens that they used to introduce young kids to music. And so I learned fundamentals, how to read and hand position and all that. But then like they started teaching me, like I would have songs with like walking bass lines, these little blues. They had a whole like catalog of these blues, like blues, Bluze, like blues number 5. And it was a walking bass and a blues melody. And so it taught me to swing, and it taught me about phrasing and all that stuff from through the lens of jazz, of blues and jazz. And so it's always near and dear to my heart, but I haven't followed that road near disciplined enough to really call myself like a jazz musician. It influences everything I do. But when I moved to Nashville in the '80s and I started playing on country sessions, playing on country records, um, back then artists would oftentimes have a country swing song on a record, like George Strait or uh, you know Keith Whitley, who I got to play on his records before he died. I mean, they would put these, and so I got to, and swinging is swinging. I mean, even if it's just it's an adjustment between I'm laying back this much or I'm laying back only this much, but it's still swing is swing, and I could swing, and I had this vocabulary. I had this kind of bebop vocabulary from having been a jazz player and going to college, and with a little, I mean, if you look at Bob Wills, and Western swing, the orange of that, and you look at swing music, Benny Goodman, and it's harmonically and melodically, it's extremely similar, and it's pentatonic, a lot of pentatonic scale with chromatic approach notes thrown in to give it a little flair, and blues scale, right? And so I had that, and so for me, it was more a matter of like, understanding the genre and kind of knowing what the outside boundaries were. And then, I mean, that really helped me establish myself in Nashville, was respecting the genre, knowing what it was, but then, allowing myself to let this other side of myself inform what I do. And similarly with ballads, having a bit of a deeper harmonic knowledge than maybe some of the other pianists that had come up just playing country music. So on ballads, I could throw in a little cluster, like sort of a little nod to Bill Evans or something, and it became a signature for me. I guess all that's to say is that it informs what I do. But to me, like guys that would call themselves a jazz player, I mean, it's such a deep and heavy discipline,
Mm.
and I have not. That's not what I've done. I mean, I keep my foot in it enough, but I've made a lot of commercial music. I've played on a lot of country and rock and pop records, and so I'm just a guy who does what he does. It's eclectic.
Did you ever meet the great Ramsey Lewis?
No, I never met Ramsey. I'd love to. He's still around, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
He was my very first. He was, and that very first teacher of mine turned me on to Ramsey Lewis when I was 9 years old. He was my first, and that, on my record that I put out last year, um, we recorded the old spiritual Wade in the Water with the Warren Treaty and the Blind Boys of Alabama. And that was from the very first Ramsey Lewis. I mean, that song got inside me, at 9 years old. My very first, Ramsey had a hit on that song. He had an instrumental hit on Wade in the Water. And it's been a part of my sort of DNA ever since, which is why it made it to my record. I'd love to meet Ramsey. Amazing.
We're putting that out there into the universe. So
All right. Beautiful.
kind of a I don't know what you call it, kind of an aside. I was listening to this recent Jimmy Buffett record that came out.
Yeah.
And there's a vastly underrated song, The Night I Painted the Sky, that he re-recorded. And that's you playing the accordion, is that correct?
Yeah, I did it right here.
Yeah?
So Mac McAnally, who's Jimmy's longtime kind of second command guitar player and producer a lot, lives across the street from me and is an old friend of mine. And so he just called me one day and said, "Hey, you want to play accordion on a Buffett song?" I said, "Yeah, send it over." So he sent it over, and I stood right there with a mic, and that's a neat song. I lied. It was really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. I'm glad that you brought up Mosaic. I'm hoping we can talk about it.
I'm happy to talk about it.
I have been listening to this. I'm so glad that I've had a chance to listen to it. Matt, it is a beautiful record. It's one of those things you listen to it and you think everything is exactly how it's supposed to be.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
I love it. It's great.
It was a labor of love. I just approved, literally minutes before walking out here to talk with you, I approved the test pressing of the vinyl. So that'll be available very soon. So that's exciting as well.
That's good news.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you what gave you this inspiration? It's such a cool idea. The great, legendary Ramblin' Jack Elliott singing on a Lyle Lovett song. I thought, this is imagination right here. How did you get inspired to do that? And furthermore, what did you think when you were listening to that for the first time?
Uh, Ramblin' Jack, I mean, Ramblin' Jack is kind of the reason we made the whole record, to be honest, is and I'll try to be as brief as I can with the story, but I was on the road. This would have been I guess in 2018, Lord, uh, with Alison Krauss. And we were on a break from our tour, and I was in Northern California in Marin County, where my wife and son were, spending time because she has family there. So I met him there on about a 2-week break, and we left our boy, who's 11 now, is going to be 12, but he was probably 9 then. And we left him with his grandparents, which he was perfectly fine with. And we got a little Airbnb in this town called Inverness, which is in West Marin County. And there's a little inland bay called Tomales Bay. And on the ocean side, so there's the Pacific, right? And there's Point Reyes, which is this big peninsula that juts out into the Pacific, and there's a lighthouse there. It's a national seashore. And then just inland, kind of over the hill, is this long kind of finger bay called Tomales Bay. And as you go north, Tomales Bay eventually spills out into Bodega Bay, which then spills out into the Pacific. And that's above, way above the Golden Gate and above Point Reyes and all that. So anyway, we're on this side. We have 4 nights there. And our last night, if you go down the bottom of the bay and then back up again, you're on Highway 1. And Highway 1 continues to go up and up north, right? And so almost to the top of the bay, there's a place called Nick's Cove. And Nick's Cove is right on the bay, this little seafood joint. And they've got a couple of cabins so you can drive up there and like eat seafood and spend the night. We didn't do that. We just got a reservation for dinner. So there's Nick's Cove on the bay, and they've got a pier, right, that juts out into the bay, and there's a boathouse at the end of the pier. And so we get there. It's a typical West Marin, like up there, foggy. The fog is kind of settling. It's not dark yet. It's about 6:30. And we said, well, let's walk out the pier and check out the boathouse before dinner. So we do that. We walk into this boathouse, and there's a wood burning stove with a fire lit, right? And there's a big table, and there's this old guy sitting at this table, right? He's got a sketch pad and he's sitting by the fire. This old guy, right? He's got suspenders on. He looks good. He's got, he looks sharp. And as we walk in, there's an upright piano against the wall, right? Which is random. It's like this really wet place. It's a boathouse. It's right in the bay. There's an upright piano. My wife walked in first, and very atypical of her, but she plunked a note down, and her what she told me later was, it's in a boathouse. I didn't even know if there were strings in it. I was just checking it out. So she plunked this note. This old guy turned around. He said, "Oh, you gonna play me something?" And my wife said, "No, that's all I got." But I said, "I'll play you something." And no bench. I just stood there and I just improvised a little ragtime in F, probably just played some little fun for this guy. And this old guy just lit up and he started talking, and he was, "Oh, you in a band?" And I was keeping it close. We didn't know who this guy was. I did keep it close to the vest. And he said, "I've written 2 songs in my life, and the first one, Johnny Cash recorded. It's called A Cup of Coffee." And we're going, "Really? All right. Who is this guy?" And I played some more for him. He had a sketch pad, and on the sketch pad, he had drawn this like kind of point of view from the inside of an old Peterbilt semi with dual shifters, big long hood, and all this stuff. And I was remarking that. He said, "Oh yeah." He said, "If I'd kept doing this, I wouldn't have had to play guitar my whole life." All this. So we're like, so we talk. I play some more. He loves what I'm playing. It's just this real connection, kind of buzzy thing was happening. He was like this little leprechaun in the boathouse, right? It turns out it's Ramblin' Jack. It's Ramblin' Jack Elliott, who lives just down the road, a little bit south in Marshall, California, and he's been there for like 40 years. And he comes up to the boathouse. He sits by the fire. He sketches. He hangs out. So we spent an hour in this boathouse with Ramblin' Jack. Missed our reservation completely, but he walked us back. He's telling us stuff like, "Yeah, when I was 40, I had a Vespa. I rode my Vespa over the Italian Alps for 2 years." He said, "When I was 39, I learned to bull ride." He's all these, just one story after another, just all, and it's all true. It's 100% true. And so anyway, we got into the restaurant. They gave us, and we got this window seat. And if you ever see, there's a picture, I think it's maybe on the back of the CD, but it'll be a picture in the album cover too. There's a picture of this boathouse that I took from the window of our dinner that night, and it's a really haunting image, and it's of the boathouse, and then out in the middle of the bay, opposite the boathouse, is Hog Island. It's just this big rock with these big trees growing out of it, really spooky. So we both kind of looked at each other through this whole dinner like, what the hell just happened? It felt like we'd just gone to Avalon or something, like we had been visited. We went back to our Airbnb, and I immediately got on the computer to Google Ramblin' Jack, half expecting that he had died 3 years ago or something, like really just feeling like this was this mystical thing. But no, there he was, and it had his management, and at that point he was signed to Epitaph Records in LA. And anyway, I was left, and sorry to go so long, but this is how this thing happened. Is I was left with this really strong feeling that I was supposed to make some music with this guy. And as a record producer, like that's where my mind went first, was maybe I'm supposed to produce a record, right? And I looked him up, and the last record he had made had been a decade before. Jay Belleros, who was on the road with me with Alison Krauss playing drums, and who wound up playing on this whole record for me. Jay played drums on it, and it won the Best Traditional Blues Grammy that year. So anyway, I got on the phone. My then manager and I started talking, scheming, like, how are we going to make this happen? How can we, let's get blah, blah, blah. So cut to like, I don't know, a month later, 3 weeks later, I'm on another break from tour. And this time, now I'm back here in Nashville. My wife and I are, the boys asleep, and we're getting ready to go to bed. And I'm talking about Ramblin' Jack. And my wife, who's very wise, says, "Matt, it feels like you're kind of in the chase for this thing. Like, it's, I don't know. It feels like you're maybe kind of losing some of that magic that we had that night, because you're really trying to figure out how to chase this thing down." And we talked. I grumbled, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not in the chase. I'm, I'm inspired, blah, blah, blah." But anyway, we talked. I hung in there with her, and we talked about it. And then at one point during this conversation, she said, "I have an idea, Matt. Why don't you make a record and ask Ramblin' Jack to sing on it?" And it was like a lightning bolt for me. It's like, holy shit, that's an amazing idea. And then immediately my brain started thinking, well, who else could I ask? I mean, doesn't have to just, Ramblin' Jack's a great, I could ask Lyle. I've been working with Lyle for 40 years. What about Allison? What about Willie? Like, it just started coming, all these people, these amazing artists that I have friendships and working relationships with, and all this great mutual respect that would all be amazing. So that was how it was born. And then the song selection, we just kind of came to this notion that the songs to cut with these people should either be an original that I've written, a classic song, like If I Had a Boat, that I was a part of an original record, a part of an original recording, or the third category was just a song that's just really a part of my musical DNA, which is where Take Me to the Mardi Gras and Spirits in the Material World, they came from that category. And so with each artist, as I started gathering artists and getting their yes, it just started a process of just sort of searching, but also waiting for the right song to show up, like looking through all the music that I know and that I have, thinking of music, listening to music. And that one came quickly. I've played that song with Lyle 10,000 times probably. And when I started thinking about Ramblin' Jack singing it, it just was like, well, yeah, of course, because he is a cowboy, and he has, he's a boat guy. Like he's rebuilt boats, and he's sailed, and so I just imagine that this could be, because Lyle wrote that song from the perspective of a child,
Mm.
thinking I don't have to be just one thing. I can be whatever I want to be. I can be, I can be a cowboy and a ship captain at the same time, right? But then from Ramblin' Jack, this older guy who's lived this life and done all these things, it seemed like it could be kind of this swan song. And it just it came out that way to me. It came out such a wistful and beautiful and almost melancholy read on it.
It is one of those magical things. And what a story. That's great.
Yeah, sorry it went on so long.
No, it's okay.
It's hard to make that one shorter. It's just that's the story of the record.
It's magical. This is a perfect segue you gave me, because I have a question that was submitted. And this is from Lyle Lovett,
Really?
somebody who I've always found Lyle Lovett to be, he's kind of, to me anyways, he's kind of a mysterious person. Like
Yeah.
he's intriguing, to say the least. But this
Absolutely.
is his question, and even the question is maybe cryptic. Do you prefer playing piano one-handed or two-handed?
Well, the answer to that is it depends on who the other hand is.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll tell you the story of why that means something,
Okay.
which is that last year, 2 years ago, October 2019, I was doing hot yoga, Bikram yoga, which I don't know if you're familiar with hot yoga, but it's a style of yoga that's very rigorous and that you do in about 105-degree room for 90 minutes. And I used to do it when we lived in Los Angeles when I was younger. I was really into it. It was kind of my main thing. And I kept doing it. And this was kind of at the end, right after I'd gotten off of tour with Alison Krauss. I'd been doing some on the road, and thankfully this didn't happen on the road, but it happened at home. And October 29th, maybe, there's a pose where you're lying flat on your stomach, and you've got your hands like this. You've got your hands underneath you like this, lying flat, and then it's called half locust. And the pose is you get there first, and you've got your chin like this, and then you spread your fingers out and you push to lift your legs up in the back, right? So you're using your back, and you're just cranking your legs up and also putting pressure on. And during this pose on this particular class, I felt this ripping, horrible feeling and pain. And I had torn almost all the way through my distal biceps tendon in this arm, my left arm. Got the MRI, did all that stuff, and a week later, I was in Birmingham having surgery done on my arm with like the top sports medicine guy, and then 3 months of recovery. Where I really couldn't play. And so, that was October. That November was packed wall to wall with sessions I had booked for other people. One of which was Lyle Lovett's new record. Now, I haven't missed a Lyle Lovett record in many years, decades, right? This one I was going to miss. And so Jim Cox, who is, the guy who now usually travels with him, but who was my replacement on the road with Lyle when I started working with Knopfler in 05. And So I went in to just one day during their tracking. They were tracking for a couple weeks, and I just went in to say hi to everybody. I was in a sling. I mean, I was in like this brace that they had to dial in the amount of this that I could have
Hmm.
in a sling, still in a lot of pain, and and it was great to see everybody, all my old friends and Lyle, and they were very warm. And then they said, we're going to record this blues song. Do you want to play? And so I played on this one song, and I got on this side of the piano. There's a keyboard right here. I don't know if you can see,
Mm-hmm.
but and then Jim Cox sat here, and he played the left hand, and I played the right hand with my arm in the thing, and it made it to the record. So I took a so we traded solos, and I had just played with one hand. So uh, that's where the question came.
Interesting. Very interesting. And thank you, Lyle, for that
And how
question.
did you get Lyle? How did that happen? That you got a submission from Lyle?
I just emailed him and I said,
Fantastic.
hey, I got this idea. I said, I know I'm cutting it close, but maybe you would have a question for Matt and I would read it on the air.
That's a perfect question. And I just got to say, Lyle's one of the most loyal and generous people that I've ever met, and it was just exhibited. Uh, uh, it was exhibited in this instance where he was happy to let me watch, but he wanted to give me the opportunity if I was up for it to be a part of the record, and it was a beautiful thing. It really it made my month because I had been sitting at home with you know
Hmm.
with a bum arm, it's terrible. So
Well, he
all good
also,
now.
what's that?
I said it's all good now. I'm all healed.
He also said that. He also said this. He said, Matt is one of my favorite people in the world. I love him like a brother. He is without question one of the most gifted musicians on the planet.
Wow. Well, that's lovely. I don't know what to say to that other than I love you too, Lyle. 100%.
So before we go, Matt, is there anything on the horizons? We have this vinyl version of Mosaic to look forward to,
Yeah.
but anything else?
Well, the new Blues Traveler record is coming out very soon, and that's super exciting. And they're on Roundhill now, and they're very excited about the record. Um, I can't say who, but I'm in talks with an artist um, about a new record that we will probably track in April in LA and come back and work on here that will have many special guests. And I'm also talking with someone about partnering to start making some solo piano records.
Nice.
So that's all coming up, and there's another record too, another EP for a beautiful young Italian actress and singer that probably will get started in the fall. So I'm got them pretty stacked up, which is great. We're going to try to get a vacation in there and drive again to Northern California like we
Nice.
did last year, and give our son a break from Nashville and see some family and all of that. So
I always like to give the guest the stage at the end, and it's a very open ended question, but I know there's no doubt in my mind people will be tuning in from all over the world.
yeah,
So, Matt, what would you say to anybody who's joining us?
wow, that's a pretty broad question. What I would say to anybody who's joining us is, you know, uh, don't be afraid to listen to your voice. There are a lot of people who, who we allow ourselves to convince ourselves that our voice maybe isn't as important as their voice is, and I think that the older I get, the more that I realize the only voice and that I really need to be um, taken care of and accountable to is my own. And once I've done that, then I'm able to be fully present, to collaborate, to be in relationship, to laugh and love and cry and do all those things that we need to do to be, healthy humans. But the first thing is to just to is to be true to myself. I mean, as corny as that sounds, that's the biggest lesson for me in my life, continues to be. And and that opens the door to everything, truly.
Hmm.
So that's what I would say, something light like that.
I don't think that's corny at all. I thought that was a great answer. Matt, thank you
Lovely.
very much. I've really enjoyed. Been an
Th-
honor.
Well, thank you, Paul. It's a pleasure. I'm glad we got to work it out. I know I rescheduled a handful of times, so thanks for sticking with me, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
I hope we have a chance to talk again someday. I really enjoyed it.
Lovely. Me too, Paul. Be
All
well.
right. You
Okay.
too. Till next
Thank
time.
thank you.